It's going to be great when member Katniss makes an appearance. We'll all rise and clap for him. Poor Jason. We're going to get started. Just a second, folks.
Come back and turn it back.
She's in there about her headset. She likes her headset. All right, I think that's the official sign that we're gonna get started. I see that we're being joined on Zoom by Dr. Clay and member Kervikis. So glad you could be with us today. And I will go ahead and call this meeting to order at 10:10 and ask that Director Ross take roll for us.
Director Corr, President Corr.
Present.
Vice President Haley.
Present.
Superintendent Horn. Here. Member Katniss. Here. Member Clark, not with us today. Dr. Clay.
Present.
Dr. Hagerman.
Present.
Member Kervikis.
Present.
Member Meyerson.
Here.
Dr. Robbins is not with us today. Dr. Corr, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. So I get to have the honor of starting with the president's report, and I will just tell you that my heart is just filled with pride to see Yuma turn out here, and we've held this meeting here in Yuma once before, and we got derailed by the pandemic as the rest of the world did, but I'm just thrilled we're able to bring the State Board of Ed meeting back to Yuma, in part because there's a little bit of magic occurring in Yuma in the educational realm. And I felt it just super important that we be able to invite our educational partners to be with us here today, certainly at least for this beginning part. And hopefully you've had an opportunity to chat with the superintendent and members of the board. By way of introduction, if I'm missing any, you let me know, but I'll call the school districts that I believe to be and educational partners in the house. So if you would just stand and be recognized and let everyone know that Yuma shows out to support education. I believe we have representatives from Gadsden School District. Yeah, there's our Gadsden folks. Yuma Union Elementary School District 1, the one, is in the house. Crane School District. We had some Crane folks, no? We'll clap in absentia for Crane. They may have come and gone on us. Our partners, the Wildcats from the University of Arizona, saw a number of Yuma Union High School District. Woot woot. Our CTED partner, Steady. Tom was here. Tom's been here all. Tom was the first to show up and he leaves before his moment of glory. That's too bad. Somerton School District. Somerton in the front row, we'd expect nothing less. Absolutely. Yuma County School Superintendent Tom is with us. Tom Hurt, Superintendent Hurt. And then we have Matadors in the house, Arizona Western College. I know a number of folks have been with us. And to all our other friends and guests, welcome to Yuma. This is where folks from El Central come to cool off during the summer. Okay, I didn't know if that would play well. Okay, good. We truly are just very proud. We're very proud of what's happening here in Yuma. Yuma loves education. It is a community that is passionate about education. It's a community that's energetic and forward-looking and supportive of all these educational institutions. And I'm thrilled that over the next 2 days, we'll be able to highlight some of the good work being done, at San Luis High School, Yuma Union, here at AWC, our university partners. So again, my heart is just filled with pride. And to my friends who took time on a Monday morning to come by and see us, I thank you. You're absolutely welcome to stay for the meeting. Certainly you'll want to stay for the superintendent's report. Stay as long as you want, and we're just pleased to be partners with you. So with that, I will turn to the superintendent for his report.
Thank you. It's great to be back in Yuma. I've been here many times.
There we go.
Thank you. It's great to be back in Yuma. I've been here many times, both when I was previously in office and again this year. This is the first time I actually saw the full campus of this college, and it's very impressive. Congratulations, Dan. This is a very, very impressive operation.
Thank you.
Both physically and, of course, what is achieved here. You could go to the statistics and find that students in Yuma greatly outperform what you predict from their economics, largely because of the terrific partnership between the college here and the high schools. So we pay tribute to you and to Yuma. Yuma is a special place for me also because I'm an amateur classical pianist, and I have twice soloed with the Yuma Symphony, which was a great honor, and which will live in my memory as a very special place. In publicity, the media tend to focus on the controversial things that I do, and I have my fair share of controversial things. But over 90% of our efforts, both mine and the 600 people who work at the Department of Education, is to help schools achieve better academic outcomes for students. Our slogan is, "We are a service organization dedicated to raising academic outcomes and empower parents." And that's really what we're all about. It's the overwhelming majority of what we do is helping schools. It's not exciting for the news media, but it's very important for the future of our state. And because of that, I'm going to refrain from having a report because Michelle Udall, who heads up our school improvement division, is going to be giving a report, and I will simply defer to her as she'll be talking about by far the most important thing that we do. Thanks.
Thank you, Superintendent Horn. Executive Director report. Director Ross.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. First off, I just want to thank Arizona Western College for hosting us today and tomorrow. This is a really special treat for us to get to travel, and this is a beautiful venue, beautiful room. People just could not have been friendlier or more helpful. And I especially want to thank Yuma for hosting us. There's so much great work happening in this part of the state, and it's wonderful to get to come here, highlight that work. I'm excited for the presentations tomorrow during the retreat as well, and to see some old friends. I've known Dwayne Shepard for years, and to see some folks who I've had a chance to work with over the years. So thank you so much. And then I just want to make a couple specific thank yous. Ashley Harrington and Noemi Barraza at Arizona Western College have been invaluable in not only helping us plan the retreat, organize, make sure everything's ready, but executing to an unbelievable standard. And it's really thanks to them that this is all happening. Ashley is also our point of contact often for Dr. Kaur, and she is amazing and does a lot to help the board, even though that's probably the smallest part of her job. And so big thank you to both of them. Yes, let's. And then, every meeting I try to do a staff spotlight, and I had purposely held this one back for the retreat. I want to make sure we spotlight Melissa, who is our office manager and who is, well, all things really for the board, has the longest tenure with board staff, and so has a deep institutional knowledge, has a deep kindness and patience, and does an unbelievable job in keeping the work of the board staff moving, keeping the work of the board moving, and has such a great attention to detail that she makes my failings look not like failings. And so that's really appreciated. But Melissa is really the heart of our staff. And I'm just so thankful for her. And in particular, this retreat is a huge sign of the amazing work she does for us. So thank you so much, Melissa. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Ross. I'll move us on to item number 2, call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or on the consent portion of the agenda. And all speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we have 2 folks who have registered to speak in person for this call to the public, and then several virtual. So up first in person will be Alma Sandigo, and then Luisa Areola. I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to see you all in Yuma, and it's good to be here. I'm here to request support and maintenance of SB 1014 as decided in 2019, which includes the model of dual language programs for SEI or as part of SEI. I have been an SEI teacher. I have been a dual language teacher as well. And now I'm in my 12th year in higher education, where I see the outcomes and the consequences of the 4-hour block SEI program. I've known it for many years since its beginning, and I can tell you that there is a great deficiency in our students that are coming from SEI programs here in the college. They lack mostly content knowledge, and with that, language, academic language, which is required for them to be successful. And so I suggest that we support, the changes. I'm glad that we have those changes. I feel that schools, if we're talking about improvement, they need choices, especially in communities like Yuma, where 64% of our students are Hispanic and where bilingualism is part of our community, not only as a deficit, as a rescue way for EL students, but just in our community. We've had people from the farming community coming to us asking for dual language programs for their own children as well. And so we see this as a plus and as a choice that we should be given to our students to be successful. Just to add a little bit more, and Dr. Kaur, you've been there as well, we work very closely with universities at the border, like, Universidad Autónoma de Baja California, and the new models are binational. They're looking for construction of labs, and they're looking into San Diego State University in California because they are producing bilingual professionals. And I believe that Yuma deserves that opportunity as well. And so I am very proud of our students who become bilingual at home. That is awesome, and I think that is something great to celebrate, but they need more. They need something that is professional. They need something that is it's gonna carry them as global citizens in where we are. And so I hope that you continue to support those changes and maintain the decisions that the legislature has made in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Luisa Areola. She's in person, and then we'll have Maria Cristina Ladas virtually.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the Arizona State Board. I come before you as a dedicated educator, driven by the urgent concern regarding the proposed campaign by Superintendent Horn. As Ms. Sandigo stated right now, 64% of our community is bilingual. But if we see it's 64% of the world people are bilingual, the world. So we need to be competing with the world. So for Ms. Sandigo to state that it's just here, this is a worldwide. So we need to continue these dual programs. And I feel the retaliation where if educational institutes do put them into place, they're not retaliated against, that their funds are not going to be taken away from them. So let us be the experts in these programs. Let us be the experts, because we are losing teachers at a rapid pace not because of compensation, but because we're not giving those teachers the respect. We're not giving them. We're letting lawyers, politicians make the decisions that count in the classroom. But you, board, have been supportive of these programs. And we hope that you guys continue to support these programs. Going back to a model passed in 2000, we just upgrade our phone every 2 years because it slows down every 2 years. But we don't question those engineers because we trust that what they're doing for our cell phones. And why am I comparing our kids to cell phones? Because that's what our lawmakers are doing. They're not taking our expertise, and we can see that data, that our teachers are leaving this state, not because of compensation, because when there was the state was in a freeze, teachers were here. We were resilient. We were resilient. We're here because the university tells us, we're not gonna make any money. You're in it for your heart. And they're still pushing out teachers. But we're not retaining them in the state of Arizona. We're not. Why? Because we're not giving them that respect. Those programs, we're the experts in those programs. Not lawyers, not politicians. We are. We are. So remember that when they propose these old 4 model block, and when you look at that cell phone, and you're comparing it to your child, we're not questioning those engineers, but we are questioning. We become our students' second parents, their nurse, their therapist. And in order for us to do that, we need to connect with those kids. And we're forgetting about that. That this is not a business of technology, cars. It's about students and humans.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Maria Cristina Ladas virtually, and then Jeff Hutchison, followed by Connor Williams.
Good morning, President Kaur, members of the Arizona State Board of Education. My name is Maria Cristina Ladas, and after 30 years of working in public education as an ESL and bilingual teacher, coordinator, and director of K-12 programs here, I'm now working as an independent consultant and may manage the Arizona DLI network, through which dual language educators in Arizona stay connected. Because of my independent status, I represent the voices of many in our network, many that are actually afraid to come here to speak today because of the media sound bites that Superintendent Horn continues to push out, insisting on having dual language with waivers and following the law, or else have legal action taken against them with the possibility of pulling their Arizona teacher or admin certificate for up to 5 years. We would like to ask that the state board prioritize resolving this issue. We appreciate that you have agreed with the Attorney General, but this has not stopped Superintendent Horn's rhetoric and actions that ultimately have English learners caught in the middle. Today, I'd like to highlight that if you do go to the ADE website, you'll see that the consent form that districts must send out to parents of English learners, letting them know which ESL model will be serving their child, has not been updated to reflect the 50-50 dual language option that this board approved in 2020. The option that is there says bilingual education with waivers. If you call and ask ADE and ask for the updated letter, they will tell you that districts that have English learners in the 50-50 DLI model must have a waiver because it's the law, the 20-year-old Proposition 203 law. Schools and districts have 30 days to send this letter home, or they are out of compliance, and then we can see what will happen. They will get written up by ADE, and this is just a big confusion. Let's talk about these waivers real quick. Superintendent Horn says that it only takes 5 seconds to sign a waiver. This is actually what he told the Arizona Mirror just last week. He said that no parent is too busy to sign a waiver. However, I want to be sure that this board understands that 99% of English learners will not qualify for a waiver after the Department of Education reinstated them. So while it might take 5 seconds for a parent to sign a piece of paper, their children will not qualify for this 50-50 option. To help you understand a little better, the waiver 1 will only work for students that already speak English, not English learners. Waiver 2 will only work for students that are 10 years or older. Dual language has to start in kindergarten or first grade. That's the model. It's different from the old bilingual models. There are no dual language programs in the US that start at age 10. Waiver 3 will only work for students that have undergone a 30-day trial in an English classroom and that have had an extensive study showing that they have special needs and therefore would be better served in a DLI model. The 250-word report must be signed by the teachers, administrators, and even the superintendent. Again, a fear tactic. It's really not right for schools and districts to be afraid of becoming a target for Superintendent Horn and the monitoring team visits from that same department that is supposed to support them. It's not right to keep English learners out of the most effective dual language immersion model. And this is not the climate that is conducive to advancing our education here in Arizona. So I thank you in advance for holding the department accountable.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Jeff Hutchison, followed by Connor Williams, and then Chantel Meek.
Well, good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to say good morning to President Kaur and the full board. And thank you very much for the opportunity to address you this morning. My name is Jeff Hutchison. I am the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for TESOL International Association, which works very closely with our affiliates, both within the United States and around the world. And am here today in coordination with our affiliate, Arizona TESOL, in support of English language learners in the state and their access to dual language programs. One thing that I would like to highlight is that with TESOL's perspective, we work with many different schools, not just in the United States, but across the world. And one thing that we see often is I hesitate to say this, but putting down and diminishing the home language of individuals. And when we see what is happening, like right now with the lack of access, except through waivers, to dual language programs, it takes away opportunity and it takes away both the benefits to the English language learner as well as to those within the dual language programs who are native speakers as well. Bodies of research has continued to abound, showing the benefits of not just cognitive and academic achievements, but also economic benefits, both to the English language learner as well as their cohorts, and in and above others that are in through traditional bilingual education, as well as their cohorts in monolingual education. So we are just calling for support, that there be consideration or reconsideration of access for English language learners in these programs. We very much advocate for an asset-based approach in any type of educational program for English language learners. And that is especially in the case here, where dual language does highlight the benefits and the resources that the student brings from their home language. It does not diminish that in any way. So we want to make sure that that is advocated for, not just for the language learners themselves, but also their families. Incidentally, you're in, as I understand, meeting in Yuma today, and that is District 7, where Representative Grijalva is out of, and he on the federal level is advocating for more access and federal funding for dual language programs for not just English language learners, but other minorities. One of his key positions right now is an act called the Syllable Act, which would bring more monies to allow access for minorities and English learners into dual language programs. It would be remiss if the residents within his own district would not be able to access that because of the practice that is happening there now. So in short, I just wanted to say that, again, we're very thankful for the opportunity to be here in front, very thankful for the work that is taking place, not just here in Yuma, but across all of Arizona, and not just for English language learners, but also for all the families and other learners as well. And so we do request that the state board does reconsider its position for access of English learners for dual language programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Connor Williams, followed by Chantel Meek, and then Sigrid Soto Boykin.
Good morning, President Kaur and board members. I'm Dr. Connor P. Williams, and I'm a researcher based in Washington, D.C. My work is predominantly focused on two areas. One, on improving how schools serve English learning students and help them learn English. And two, studying how school choice programs give families options to meet their children's unique needs. So thank you for the chance to speak here today with you. I wish that I could be in Yuma with you. I am speaking for myself only as an individual, and I want to comment on Arizona's recent shifts to bring their education system into better alignment with the research consensus on how English learners best learn that language. A host of studies over the past few decades have shown that dual language immersion programs and bilingual education programs are the best way to support English learning children's, number one, English acquisition, and two, their academic success. And this can seem counterintuitive, I understand. After all, if the goal is learn English, you'd think that students immersed in more English would learn it best and fastest. But in study after study, that's just not what we see. And again, I can't stress enough, the facts simply do not show that that intuitive approach worked particularly well. We don't know exactly why dual language schools are so effective for English learners, but we do have some sense of the mechanism. It goes something like this. English learning students who arrive in pre-K or in kindergarten and begin the process of learning English there in school, they generally do so by building on language skills they already have. Put it to you this way. A kid who speaks Spanish at home may not have particularly high levels of English proficiency when they show up in kindergarten, but they do know something about how language works. In Spanish, they have some early proficiencies in building sentences or using components like nouns or verbs or other descriptive words to convey meaning. Unsurprisingly, when they begin the process of learning English, then they lean on those things that they already know how to do in Spanish to understand how this new language, English, works. Not everything is the same across the two languages. As somebody who's spent a lifetime trying to get better at Spanish, I can attest to that. However, there are a lot of important commonalities, and that appears to be the key. This is why dual language appears to work so well. In these programs, students get exposed to English, but they also get opportunities to deepen their understanding of their home language that they have as well. And that deeper understanding of their home language then becomes its own tool that they can then use to add more English to their repertoire. These programs, dual language programs, they help students learn English, English learners learn English. They help English learners do better academically. They help English learners retain their bilingualism. They foster diverse learning environments for all children of all ranges of language diversity. And again, these aren't talking points. These are just the facts. That's what research shows. There isn't any serious contention about that. So every other state in the country has recognized this and is moving to expand English learners' access to dual language programming, giving families options to choose the types of learning in language that works best for their kids. So it's exciting to see Arizona moving in that direction also. And I hope that you keep up that momentum. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Chantel Meek, followed by Sigrid Soto Boykin, and then Bonnie Massa.
Good morning, President Kaur and members of the board. My name is Chantel Meek, and I'm the founding executive director of the Children's Equity Project at ASU. I'm also the parent of a bilingual child in a dual language program in Phoenix. The Children's Equity Project is a nonpartisan research and policy center housed at ASU and led in collaboration with scholars and researchers from over a dozen other universities across the United States. We conduct rigorous research, facilitate nationwide training to create more fair learning systems. We engage with families, and we partner with policymakers across the country to close opportunity gaps so that all of our kids thrive. We focus on and have deep expertise in English learners. The Children's Equity Project, in partnership with over 20 colleagues at the 3 major public universities in the state, jointly wrote a letter to the board to express great concern with recent attempts to roll back access to dual language education for English learners. I'm going to go over a little bit of the research that supports that position. Research shows, as Dr. Williams just shared and others have shared before him, that there are significant cognitive, social, academic, and economic benefits to bilingualism. Second language learning should be embraced as an opportunity extended to all kids, but research suggests that it's an especially powerful instructional model to support English learners specifically. Research has found that English learners who receive high quality instruction in their home language alongside English outperform their English learner peers who attend English-only models and approaches across a number of domains, including, as Dr. Williams mentioned previously, better and faster English language acquisition trajectories, and of course, stronger bilingual skills over time. Access to dual language education is associated with higher scores in math and reading and faster exit from EL classification. ELs who attend dual language programs in preschool or kindergarten in those early years are more likely to be proficient in English by the time they reach middle school. We know that many ELs who attend Spanish-English dual language immersion programs in elementary school continue taking advanced placement Spanish classes in high school, which gives them a leg up, as you all know, in the transition to college and so on and so forth. Spanish-speaking Latinos in particular, one study found, who maintain their bilingualism are more likely to attend a four-year college, which eliminates the need to transfer colleges and may increase the likelihood of degree attainment. Studies have also found economic benefits in the long term to balance bilingualism, including Spanish-speaking ELs who become balanced bilinguals earn on average $5,400 more per year than their EL peers who lose their proficiency over time through the English immersion model. So dual language education can also promote greater family and school partnerships, which I know everybody on the board agrees is critical to children's education. A recent survey of thousands of Latino parents identified bilingual education as a high priority for their children's education. So if the state is really about parent choice and parent empowerment, we think it's critical to also consider, and especially consider, the choice and empowerment of Latino families who make up the largest demographic group in the public school-age population in the state. So indeed, in this state and around the nation, support for dual language education is growing, and we should respond accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
President Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Sigrid Soto-Boykin, followed by Bonnie Massa, and then Margarita Jimenez Silva.
Good morning, President Kaur and members of the board. My name is Dr. Sigrid Soto-Boykin. I'm a senior scientist of bilingual learning at the Children's Equity Project. But more importantly, and the reason why I do this work is because I also was an English learner when I moved from Puerto Rico to Florida. And unfortunately, at that time, I didn't receive any bilingual education. In fact, my teachers told me that I should be, in fact, they put me in special education by mistake and really didn't have much hope for me. Thankfully, within all of that, I also had excellent teachers that saw my bilingualism as an asset. And I really wouldn't be talking to you all today, the first person in my family to graduate college. And then I went far and beyond all of our expectations with a PhD because of the opportunities that I received to foster my bilingualism. So before I give you professional accolades, I think it's really important to bring my insider perspective because I represent so many people in Arizona and across the United States. As my colleague, Dr. Meek shared, the research is really clear. Bilingualism is an asset for dual language learners or English learners, and it never deters English acquisition, which we all agree is really our goal, our common goal and consensus about why we make the decisions that we do. But further, we really believe that decreasing access to dual language education to ELs it's really contradictory to what the science says. So if we choose English-only approaches for English learners, we're really contradicting research and best practice. And we also know that presently 67% of public schools in Arizona with an F rating are primarily serving Latinos. And these statistics really point largely to the gaps in opportunity that are affected by the reduced access to dual language education. This also affects Indigenous students who have a right to learn in their heritage language and benefit holistically from doing so. Unfortunately, we know that Arizona is the only state that still has an English-only policy, and it also contributes to the abysmal graduation rates of ELs in the state. All other 49 states represented by both Republican and Democratic leaders do not have this mandate in place. We don't have to look really far. If we look at our regional neighbors of Texas and Utah, they also have fiscal incentives, programming really geared towards supporting bilingualism and biliteracy in eHealth. Texas has been a particular pioneer in bilingual education. So for example, in 1981, they passed the Texas Education Act, requiring school districts to offer all children who are English learners starting in preschool up to 12th grade with bilingual education. And finally, we know that there's a big gap between ELs and non-ELs in Arizona, which really contributes to one of the poorest outcomes for ELs, which is 47% graduation rate compared to 77 and 70% in Texas and Utah. So it's really important that this state kind of aligns with research and creates policies to support dual language learners. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Bonnie Massa, followed by Margarita Jimenez Silva, and then Ana Manzano.
Dear President Kaur and members of the State Board of Education, my name is Bonnie Mazza, and I am a parent of 2 elementary students in dual immersion programs at a public school district in Maricopa County. We are an English dominant family. All 4 of our children speak English as their first language, but we strongly value the benefits and opportunities of multilingualism. Because of this, my husband and I sought out a public school that would give our kids an opportunity to learn another language from an early age. Our kids' school is amazing. The school offers a pre-K option, and there's such a strong community of families that make the school so incredible. Families drive in from all over the district and outside of the district to have their kids attend the program. The dual immersion program aspect means that our kids are learning from teachers who are native speakers for half of their day. It's incredible to see how they're soaking up the language. Our kids now speak to each other in Spanish at home, and they can read and write in Spanish as only 4th and 2nd graders. I'm addressing the board today because I would like to impress upon you my concern for the English language learners who attend our school and are being singled out. I want to speak up for these families and let the board know that these families chose our open enrollment school for the immersion program, and they do not want to leave or be segregated into English only language classrooms. Our school's native Spanish speakers come from our local community and abroad, and they are thriving in the dual immersion program. The best language models, as we've heard from all of these experts, have classes with native speakers, and we want our EL students to continue to be a part of our school's mainstream immersion classrooms and the school community overall. In fact, we would like more EL students to be a part of our school's programs and programs throughout the state. We want them to have the opportunity to learn well in multiple languages, and that is exactly what our school is doing. So please, I urge you to continue to protect these dual immersion programs and fully include EL students in these classrooms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Margarita Jimenez Silva, followed by Emilia L. Kayat. She's taking the place of Ana Manzano, and then Georgina Monsalvo.
Good morning, President Kaur and members of the Arizona State Board of Education. My name is Dr. Margarita Jimenez Silva, and I'm a faculty member in the University of California system. I'm here speaking as an individual, although I have the support of my dean and colleagues to speak on these issues. I bring with me my experience as a native Spanish speaker and as a former bilingual middle school math and science teacher. My research over the past 25 years is focused on supporting emerging bilinguals or English learners in K-12 schools and supporting the teachers who work with emergent bilinguals. My doctoral work at the Harvard School of Education focused on the impact of Proposition 227, which is similar to Prop 203 in California. That work led me to my work in Arizona for over 15 years. And while I have moved back to California to support Proposition 58, which brought back bilingual education to California, I continue to work with and support teachers and other educational leaders who work with our emergent bilingual communities in Arizona. Dual language programs are successful in both supporting language and academic content, especially for emerging bilinguals. We have tons and years of overwhelming research to support those successes. We keep hearing about the research that is used to claim that the English-only models worked, and that the years that we spent with the SEI models that were restrictive proved successful. I have yet to see that research, and I would love to see that research become public and available to those of us who are experts in this field. What I am seeing is the impact of English only years and the number of students who are now considering a teacher career who would like to be bilingual teachers, but who have scars, emotional and academic, from the English only experiences. Many of our native Spanish speakers who went through schools during the English only have lost their Spanish and are now working desperately to try to relearn it in the hopes to become a bilingual teacher. I currently have 2 nephews, one in kindergarten and one in 2nd grade, who are in dual language programs here in California. They're growing up with the advantage of 2 languages, academically successful with strong senses of self, and able to communicate in both English and Spanish to family members and community members. What a gift they are receiving. All students, especially in Arizona, deserve the opportunity to become bilingual. I ask you to continue to support these dual language programs that we know and we have evidence support our communities. These programs are growing across the country and internationally, as you've heard. Arizona should be heeding the calls from the experts in language development and from the teaching forces that are in the classroom working with these students, and community members and parents, as we've been hearing today, to move forwards and not backwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Emilia El Kayat, followed by Georgina Monsalvo.
Thank you. Good morning, President Court and members of the Arizona State Board. I come to you today as a parent of children attending dual language programs in Arizona. I'm very concerned about some of the suggestions that have been brought up regarding dual language. Let me back up a little bit and give some history before we move forward with my experience as an individual and as a parent. Arizona is the only state in the nation that requires English learners to be taught only in English due to Proposition 203, which was passed over 20 years ago. The proposition was passed that same year when a federal judge ruled that Arizona was not adequately funding acquisition programs. In essence, this was a move to save money and not invest in dual languages or the future of our children. 19 years later, Senate Bill 1014 passed. Senate Bill 1014 showed that English learners were not learning English under the existing administration of Proposition 203 and were making them fall behind. Senate Bill 1014 reduced the number of hours that English learners were required to receive English only instruction from 4 hours to 2 hours, which meant that schools could now do 50-50. During the pandemic, only in 1 year, schools offering dual language increased by about 37% from 80 to 110. That's 30 more schools offering dual language. And there's a reason behind that. Under the 1964 Civil Rights Act and 1974 Equal Education Opportunities Act, public schools are required that students receive equal access that includes English learners. This shows the equity that we seek to see in education for all students across the nation. Implementing propositions like 203 clearly take away from this equity and equal access, really setting kids up for failure and taking the choice away from us parents. I want to say that offering bilingual education and dual language opens doors for everyone, illustrating inclusivity and equity for all. This offers the ability for all to participate, giving both English learners and those proficient in English the ability to retain and learn a second language, which in turn will open more doors in their future professional careers, offering the capability to communicate with a larger community and also the capacity to provide services, regardless of their future profession, to a larger population in an equitable manner. The ability to have proficiency in 2 languages is very needed for success and something we should nurture at a very early stage in life. There are a number of studies that show the success that these dual language programs are doing. Plus, it has been well proven that speaking more than 1 language brings an economic benefit to our nation, proving that we have a culture of inclusivity and the ability to make everyone feel welcome and understood because we have the skill set to communicate with a larger audience. I'm a product of this system. I speak English fluently, but have made a strategic choice to speak to my children at home in Spanish, making them English learners. And again, making a choice to send them to dual language schools because I have seen the impact and opportunities this has brought to me, not only as a professional, but as a person. The freedom of choice is a right that is being taken away from us parents under what is being proposed. This is a human right that we have protected. And as a parent of 3 children, I should have the choice to select how I want my children to receive their education.
Thank you.
Dual language is my choice.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, our final speaker for this call to the public is Georgina Monsalvo.
Good morning, President Kaur and members of the State Board of Education. Today, I stand once again in your presence to address a matter of great significance to me as a parent of an ELL student and as an ELL student myself. English language learner students are an integral part of our diverse society. Nevertheless, their path to success often encounters formidable challenges further exacerbated by the stand taken by Superintendent Tom Horn. In a recent letter to Attorney General Chris Mays, he refuses to abide by her guidance that he must not block English language learner students from dual language programs that have been approved by the State Board of Education, yet he continues his attacks on Latino students. Teaching students to learn English in English and then teaching them a similar amount of content in another language does not violate Proposition 203 for 4 clear reasons. Lawmakers can actually further the purpose. A voter-approved ballot measure, Proposition 105, states that a ballot initiative can be amended by a 3/4 vote of the legislature to further the purpose of the law. And this actually occurred in 2019 as part of SB 1014 that ensured that all children in Arizona public schools shall be taught English as rapidly and effectively as possible. Voters only wanted a temporary transition. Proposition 203 prescribes that sheltered English immersion as a temporary transition period, not normally to exceed 1 year. The Legislative Council analysis used in the 2000 voter approved pamphlet also indicates that SEI should be used during a temporary transition period. Voters clearly intended a very short transition period for students to be in sheltered English immersion, not the long drawn out segregation that occurred. Students learn English in English. Proposition 203 defines bilingual education as a language acquisition process for students in which much or all instruction is in the child's native language other than English. In dual language immersion, that is not the case. The English language acquisition process is taking place in English. The last reason is immersion wasn't supposed to be all day. Proposition 203's definitions of sheltered English immersion pertains to SEI, emphasizing English instruction, not the entire school day. The SEI time, initially 4 hours and then later was reduced to 2 hours, isn't distinct from the other activities, allowing schools to offer foreign language immersion outside of this block without conflicting with Proposition 203. Superintendent Horn's resistance to dual language immersion demonstrates a lack of adaptability to evolving educational practices and a focus on outdated ideologies. Superintendent Horn, please, we need a shift in priorities now. Student needs and modern educational practices should take precedence over political disputes. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. And our thanks to everyone who took time to share their thoughts with the board, whether in person or virtually. Thank you very much. I'm going to move us on to item 3 of the agenda, the consent agenda. And because we did not meet in July, we have quite the lengthy. I'll give members of the board just a second to scan through, and then I'll ask if anyone wants anything pulled from the consent agenda before asking for a motion to approve. So I'll give you just a second to familiarize yourself with, 30, 40 items there on the consent agenda.
And Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, some items have been removed from the back. So the motion would be to approve A through X and AA.
A through X
and AA, double A.
And AA. Thank you, Director Ross. Okay, then I will I'll seek a motion. I will seek a motion to approve items A through X and item AA. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Haley, do I have a second?
I will second.
Dr. Hagerman, thank you. Or any comments on the consent agenda? Vice President Haley?
Yes, I just have a quick comment. As I have done in prior meetings, I thank the Arizona Department of Education for the thorough presentation of all the different educator prep programs, and hope that at a future meeting, hopefully before the end of the year, that we will be able to receive the biannual data looking at the impact of these programs, given that we are approving them for 6 years at a time. So just wanted to restate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Haley, Vice President Haley. Any other comments? Dr. Clay, are you recusing yourself from any or all of these motions?
Dr. Core, members of the board, I was looking for the one for Grand Canyon University. If there's one there, yes. H, I'm recusing myself. I, H and I.
H and I. Okay. Director Ross, what's our approach here? Do I just ask for a motion that excludes those so she can vote, and then we'll do one?
Dr. Core.
I have managed to complicate a consent agenda here somehow,
okay.
But that is a true skill. That is not.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. So you would vote on A through F, which would include Dr. Clay, and then Dr. Clay would recuse herself from G, H, and I. So sorry, my apologies. You can do A through F and J through X and AA with the whole board.
Yeah. Okay.
And then G, H, and I with Dr. Clay recused.
All right. So with the permission of the good folks who have initially put forward with a motion, I'll ask for a different motion. I now seek a motion for approval of consent agenda items A through F, J to X, and item AA.
So move.
Thank you, Superintendent Horn. Vice President Haley, thank you. Any conversation on that item? All in favor, please indicate.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
This is Carla. I just had one quick comment.
Yeah, please. Go ahead, Member Kravickas.
Thank you. Reiterating Member Haley's, because one of the things I was also thinking about is we have been approving so many new certificates. I've already spoken with staff to get a little bit more background on some of these. Sometimes it's not clear on how they've come about, if they're new, if they're renewals. But one of the things I was thinking about, so when we have that presentation that Member Haley has requested, is we know we have a teacher shortage, and we've had so many conversations about how do all these new certificates and pathways, how are they impacting that potentially or currently?
Thank you, Member Kravickas.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, just a quick comment. We have been working with Bruce DePlanty at the Arizona Department of Education, who will be, hopefully by October, adding more information to each of these items so that the board has more information to make their decisions. And then there should be a biannual report available from teacher prep programs that we are lining up for a presentation in December.
Thank you, Director Ross. So I have a motion and a second. I'm ready to call the motion again. Just as a reminder, it's approval of consent agenda items A to F, J to X, and AA. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. And then I will now look for a separate motion to approve a consent agenda items G, H, and I with member Dr. Clay recusing herself. Do I have such a motion? So moved. Superintendent Horn, thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Member Catanese, thank you. Any conversation or comments? Yeah, please, Member Catanese.
Thank you, President Core. I think along with my colleagues, I think one thing that I would like later on this year is also some information with these programs on retention of teachers, because I think that as much as we are approving new programs for teachers, also retention is vital for our state, especially with, we have a teacher shortage right now, but also we want to keep our amazing educators in the classroom that are in the classroom, and getting that data will be super, super helpful for us.
Thank you, Member Catanese. Any other comments? All right, we have a motion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I'm going to move us on to item 4, which is once again a call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items on today's general session. All speakers will once again be limited to 3 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak at this point?
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we have one request to speak from Laura Knoll from the Somerton School District.
Oh, fantastic. Dr. Knoll, please.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Yeah. I want to thank you for doing this work. I mean, I just really appreciate the time and the effort and having to get out of whatever box you're in to make these decisions, and I appreciate that you're willing to do that for us. I've been a superintendent a long time, and back in the day, we actually had a dual language classroom, and the thing that's hard about dual language is you have to have a really good teacher. They have to know both languages very well. And I loved going and visiting that classroom because I learned so much English and Spanish, understanding how they were showing the 2 sentences, one that was English, one that was Spanish, saying the same thing. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I feel like we need to make sure and leave all of our options open for instruction and allow for there are times and places for different kinds of instruction that fit best. Right now I'm the superintendent at Somerton School District. We have very high scoring students if you compare them by demographic, because within the demographic we are really excelling with our students. We need all the options we can get. So I would encourage you as a state board that whenever you have the ability to allow choice about how instruction is delivered at the schools, let us have those options, because you never know when we have a pocket or a group of kids that will really benefit from that. And I appreciate Mr. Horn's focusing on the results. That's what we do. So if we give something a try and it doesn't work, we try something different because we're looking for results. And I think that looking at those results is really the key. So I thank you for the work you're doing, and I would appreciate whenever you have the opportunity, if you could just think about those of us that are doing the work, and we need options because our students don't always fit whatever category is being created by something that's popular in the state. So anytime you can give us options in how we deliver instruction, we really would appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Knoll.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
Fantastic. Then I will move us on to the general session and item 5. And here we have a presentation and discussion regarding the Arizona Department of Education school improvement activities. And I believe we are joined by Michelle Udall to present to us. And this is for information only. There'll be no vote taken on this item. So, Udall.
Thank you, Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. I appreciate this opportunity to be here. As I said, my name is Michelle Udall, and I work on school improvement with the Department of Ed. So there are 2 different types of school improvement that we do at the State Department. One is called the federal school improvement, and the other one is state school improvement. And they depend on 2 different types of accountability. Different schools fall into each. The federal uses the same metrics for all schools. So if you're an alternative school, high school, elementary, we're using the same metrics to determine who is in school improvement. And it's based on who falls into the bottom 5% based on proficiency and growth and a couple other metrics. There are a few things in there, but it's almost entirely proficiency and growth. And if your school falls in the bottom 5% of proficiency in the state, then you're automatically in federal school improvement. And there are a few different types of federal school improvement. There's comprehensive school improvement. That means your entire school falls into that bottom 5% as a whole. And there's comprehensive school improvement for grad rate. So if your graduation rate at your school is below, at your high school is below 66%, then you're in that group. There's targeted school improvement and additional targeted school improvement. And that's for schools where one or more of your subgroups falls into that bottom 5%. So if your English language learner students fall into that bottom 5%, then because of that subgroup, your school would be TSI or ATSI. And if your special ed students, the most common ones are special ed, you're income eligible, so your low income students, but then there are also racial categories as well. So if you're African American students, if your Native American students fall into that subgroup. If their subgroup falls into the bottom 5%, then your school is in targeted school improvement. So that's one side, is that federal school improvement, and we have significant funds from the federal government to handle that. On the other side, we have the state accountability measures, and that's uses different metrics depending on the type of school. So that's the A through F ratings that we're very familiar with. You approve those here, and we know that it focuses on proficiency and growth, but there's also the CCRI, the College and Career Readiness Index, and some other factors that are included in that.
My apologies for interrupting, Ms. Udall. Board members, every slide, PowerPoint slide deck is printed in this packet for you, and so if you're having trouble seeing the screen, Melissa and our staff were kind enough to print those out, so just as a heads up.
Very helpful. So we have those different types of school improvement. I'm going to focus first on the federal school improvement. We have about 150 schools in comprehensive school improvement, but we have about 1,500 schools total in some kind of federal school improvement. If they are comprehensive school improvement, we serve that school individually. They will have a specialist that works with them exclusively. If they are in TSI, so if one of their subgroups fall in, then we work at the district level. So it's a little bit different depending on what category they fall into. Our federal school improvement has done 171 in-person school support visits since January. In those visits, they spend time talking to the principal, they spend time observing classrooms, and they work with them to develop an improvement plan. And this has been going on for several years now, but we're really working to make sure that we focus more on supporting those schools. Less on just monitoring or playing gotcha, a lot more on finding out what supports they need and connecting them to those supports that they need, connecting them to the professional development they need for their teachers, helping them find what they need and really figure out what's going on that's causing them to fall into that bottom 5%. And this is the first year of re-identification. So the identification for CSI and ATSI are only done once every 3 years. And because of COVID, there was a delay, but this is the first year of re-identification. And then there's something new this year, that if schools have been in for what should have been 4 years, but ended up being 6 because of COVID, if they have not exited, so if they have not gotten their scores above that bottom 5% by the end of this year, they will fall into something called more rigorous options. Go ahead to the next slide. So more rigorous options is intensified support for improvement. And this is the first time those will be designated. We have about 30 schools that are in danger of falling into that category. We believe, looking at some of the early data, it's going to be about 20 of those that do continue to more rigorous options. We'll complete those identifications sometime next month, but again, we have a pretty good idea of who's going to fall out where based on the early data. And the schools that fall into that will receive funding to do some extra work. So they're going to have funding to work with a vendor to do kind of a comprehensive needs assessment of the school. Let's look at it, an audit that will look at their instructional performance and figure out what's going on. Schools do a comprehensive needs assessment of their own on a regular basis, but sometimes it takes that outside person to really see what's going on. Once they complete that, they'll work with a school improvement vendor to bring in outside support and make some decisions for that school on how they're going to move forward. And this is mandatory, it's not optional at this point. And the other thing is we're working closely with a group called Project Momentum. That will be their other option, is either to work with one of the vendors that have gone through the RFI process, or they can work with Project Momentum. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Project Momentum in some upcoming slides. So that's the federal school improvement side. Then we have the state school improvement side. And this is a new unit that we've built starting in January. We started building this group. And this is to serve schools that have a D or F rating that don't fall into federal school improvement. So there's not federal money to help them. We don't have federal school improvement specialists to help them. So this is a newer unit that we're working on. We currently have a director and 5 school improvement specialists now working with these schools. They've completed 77 school site visits, which is pretty amazing considering we just started in March, started hiring this group in March. So they also are really going in and providing custom support for these schools. They're looking at what are needed. Many of these schools are in small rural communities. Sometimes they're having to import teachers from out of the country. Sometimes the principal is also the bus driver, is also the maintenance, is also doing all those other things. So the support is very custom in what they need in order to help their students be successful. And they also have access to the Failing Schools Tutoring Fund. The legislature approved $1.5 million a year that comes through Prop 301 to provide tutoring to students in DNF schools. Unfortunately, that money is not getting used very well, and we're trying to get the word out more, but the legislature has also given us access to use that to help improve those schools in general. So we're using that to help fund the state school improvement work. I mentioned earlier Project Momentum Arizona. Project Momentum Arizona is a group that came into the state about 7 years ago, and through okay, there we go. They're a group that came into Arizona 3 years ago, and it's basically based on the fact that if we choose to take a few well-known, straightforward actions, we can make swift, dramatic improvements. And this has been shown time and time again. But there are a few things, if we focus on the right work in school improvement, we see incredible improvements. So this group began in Virginia, in Fairfax County, and they were brought to Arizona during Governor Ducey's request to build this group. They've had 100% success in improving academic results at a rate higher than the state average. If you look at that statistic, that's incredible. They're going into schools and helping those schools improve at a rate faster than the state average in every single one of those schools. And they started out working with Avondale, which had several D and F schools, now is almost all A's and B's. And not only are these schools improving quickly, but they're maintaining those gains and continuing to improve over time. We even saw a couple of these schools during the COVID pandemic continue to improve outcomes through the pandemic, which, as we all know, that didn't happen hardly anywhere. But some of these schools with that hyper focus on doing the right work, on doing the things that we know really drive change, were able to continue improvement even through the pandemic. They're now in 72 schools in the state, and this number is growing regularly. Like I said, that'll be one of the options for the more rigorous options, but they're really focused on the things that move change for students. Project Momentum used the GEARS framework. They have 6 gears that they focus on. And if you read some of these, what is it that we want for students to know and be able to do? What evidence would we accept that students have learned the required content? If you're familiar with some of the work around PLCs, around professional learning communities, these are very familiar questions. These are the things that we know teachers need to be asking on a regular basis and talking about. Those are the gears that are focused on. These are the things we know drive achievement. And this gives you a little bit more information. You can look at this later. We're not going to go into great detail, but this is really the framework that it's built upon. Those 6 gears, building a strong foundation for success. So schools that are involved get a principal partner, basically a mentor principal that works with the principal. They get a district coach that works with a superintendent. They get expert guidance, professional development. So we really work with these schools to help raise their ability. And one of the things we've talked a lot with some of these schools about is, one, there's a teacher shortage. You can't just fire your teachers that aren't performing. We have to raise them to the level we need them to be at. And that takes a lot of work. It takes doing the right work. It takes focusing on the right things. And that's what this is about. So getting them that expert help they need, developing effective teacher teams, and then really focusing on that tier 1, everybody in the classroom instruction. Oftentimes in some of these failing schools, they've tried to implement 8 million different programs. They're trying to do MTSS, and they're trying to do AVID, and they're doing 8 million different things that may be good programs, but they're so distracted from the things that matter most. They're so distracted that they're not focusing on, here are the standards that our students need to know. Here's how we're going to assess it. Here's how we're going to teach it. And when we refocus on those most important concepts, like I said earlier, those changes are dramatic. We see huge changes in these schools. So as we've done this work, we've looked at some of the things at the Department of Ed that have been kind of some of the hangups for schools that are in improvement. And then one of the things that came up immediately, both for schools in improvement and not, was the comprehensive needs assessment and the root cause analysis that we were requiring students to do. And when we looked at that comprehensive needs assessment, it was 168 questions long. It required schools to form committees and meet with everybody and collect all this data about their school, and it was this long, months-long process. We have worked really hard to streamline that and to align it to the best practices of what we know moves the needle. The new CNA is 20 questions long from 168. It's focused on data. It starts with about 12 questions where schools look at the data. We're going to provide them their data and allow them to look at it and look at where is your school performing in comparison to other schools in the same poverty level, in the same socioeconomic area. How is your school performing? And it also will allow them to look at other schools in that same socioeconomic area and click on another school and say, well, that school's outperforming mine. What are they doing different? Those are the conversations we want this comprehensive needs assessment to start. So the first 12 questions are based on data. The last 8 are based around some of those gears that you saw from Project Momentum. Based on, do we know what we're trying to teach students? Do we know how we're assessing it? Are assessments aligned to state standards? Do we know, are we using the best instructional processes? Do we know how to teach students? Those are the kind of things that those gears are aligned on now. They're really focused on the things that move the needle. Because we don't want to waste time with things that don't move the needle. There are a lot of things that move the needle this much, and there are a lot of schools spending a lot of time on things that barely are a blip. We want to focus on those high efficacy measures that can move the needle. So that has been public for a little while. This gives you a look at one of the questions. There are questions that include graphs like this, where you'll be able to look at a school. This is a scatter plot of math performance. And so math performance is the y-axis. The x-axis, the horizontal, is free and reduced price lunch. So schools will be able to look, the red dot would be their school. They can say, okay, so in my slice, in my poverty level, I'm performing a little below average. So they can look not only at where they're at, but they can also see that there are a bunch of dots way above theirs in that slice. There are a lot of schools with the same demographics that they have that are outperforming them dramatically. What are those schools doing? So this really gives a chance to have really solid discussions about how they are doing with their students. And there's also special attention in it to how different subgroups are doing, how students with disabilities are doing. One of the things we've noticed is that in our federal school improvement schools, the majority of them have students with disabilities, and students with EL population are performing very low. And so those are some of the things we want them to focus on. How are they improving that? How are they going to make sure that we see improvements in that? So some of the data questions focus on those things too. As I said, the focal point questions focus on how do we move the needle? What are the high efficacy things we could be doing that we may or may not be doing? How much are we doing of that? And there will be additional questions that they don't have to answer that are just some guiding questions that are included. Rather than have 168 questions they have to answer, there are 8 focal questions, and then each of those has several questions to guide their thinking. Schools will choose goals for improvement based on those questions, and they will be required to focus goals on both math and English language arts achievement on their proficiency. We want every school to have goals in each of those areas. And they can do that. Schools that are improvement will be required to focus first on teacher collaboration time, standards alignment, assessment, and quality of instruction. We know that those 4 things will move the needle fastest if a school is in dire need of improvement. Here's a couple of the questions that are the focal point questions. You'll see that they match very closely to what we saw in some of the gears. Do teachers, administrators, parents, and students have a common understanding of what we want students to know and be able to do? Do assessments and benchmarks align to standards and accurately predict state assessment results? So a lot of times we have schools giving benchmarks that don't align to our state standards. They might be 50, 60, 70% in alignment. And then when students go to take the state assessment, the students don't perform and they wonder why when the kids are doing good on the benchmarks. So it really helps us think about, is everything aligned? Is our instruction aligning to our assessments, aligning to what is expected of students? Do teachers use instructional practices that achieve the best student achievement results? That's key. If we don't have teachers learning the best way to teach things, we're not going to see improvement. I tutored math for 20 years before I started teaching math. And one of the things that I would see very frequently when I was teaching a kid, I would always try and get them to ask their teacher questions. I wanted them asking questions in class, and I would say, have you asked your teacher? Did you ask your teacher when you got confused? And they'd say, no, I used to ask my teacher. But then they would just explain it the same way they already explained it. And I didn't understand it the first time. Why would I understand it the second time? One of the things we need to make sure that as teachers we're learning to do is to explain things in different ways, to present things in a variety of ways that are effective. And so that was one of the things that I learned when I tutored and tried very hard to do as I taught math, was that if I had a student ask a question about something I just taught, I made sure to try and teach it in a different way. Let's try explaining it this way. That way they had different avenues to come at the problem from. And I found that very effective in teaching. It's effective reteaching provided when students have not learned required content. And that speaks to that you have to reteach it in an effective way. Those are only 4 of the 8 questions, but they are 4 of the most vital ones of the 8. So again, there will be some supplemental materials, things that schools don't have to answer, but just for their information, for their use. This will include rubrics, guiding questions, examples of evidence. I will say the entire thing right now is about 20 pages long with all the supplemental materials. The previous one was well over 100 pages long. And that is all available on the website, on ADU's website. There's a draft of that comprehensive needs assessment available. So we do have some early results for our new state and school improvement team I wanted to share, kind of some exciting ones. Of the 46 DNF schools that were in state school improvement, so these are the DNFs that did not qualify for federal school improvement, but that we worked with just in our state school improvement. I'm looking at the new data, and this is still preliminary, but it looks like only 7 of those are likely to remain a DRF this year. So that's a huge celebration. I would love us to claim that that was all us, but we just started this unit in March. It's completely us. 2 of those schools that we worked with appear to be going from a D to an A, and 2 of them appear to be going from an F to a B. So we have seen there are schools in the state doing amazing things, and we'd love to come back at some point and highlight some of those high flyers that went from really difficult situations and what did they do to see those kind of growth in 1 year, because that's incredible. And it's not something we see real often. So I think that's all. We're working hard. We're excited to be working with schools. We love supporting them. And we're really trying to get the message out there that we're there to be a support, not a gotcha. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I appreciate the presentation, as Associate Superintendent. You don't, questions, comments from members of the board? Yeah, I'll start down with Member Catanese and work this way.
Thank you, President Kaur, Superintendent Horn, member of the board, Associate Superintendent Udall. Thank you for your presentation. This is awesome. I have a question about Project Momentum and like who you work with. Is it only schools that are currently labeled D and F schools, or if another school wanted help, let's say they're a C school, would they be able to receive kind of a lot of these services, this program, these coaching? Because I think that that was just something that I wasn't sure about.
So Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, we do that the same we do it in the legislature. Is that not a thing?
You're fine.
Member Catanese. So they do work with several schools that are not DNFs currently. They didn't all start out at DNF. Many of them started at C, some even started at B because their district was doing it. It just depends on the funding stream. We're having to fund it from a variety of different buckets. So if they fall into federal school improvement, we can use the federal bucket, and that's the biggest one that we have available. If they don't fall into that, then we've been using some of the COVID relief funds to do it, and some of the state school improvement stuff that we have, the little bit we have. So it really depends on the funding bucket. Most districts have at least a few that fall into TSI, some of the federal school improvement, and in that case, we can use it to improve the whole district. So we have some leverage, some ways to get funding for those, and it does take funding. But as long as we can find funding for them, then yes, they will work with whoever.
I was just curious about that because I'm sure there's different schools or different districts that are listening and seeing the amazing results of this program, and also wondering, well, if I am not a DRF school, like, is this something that I could also have my students be a part of as well? And so along with that, so my first year teaching, I was actually part of a school that had a school improvement plan. So 13 years ago, my school, the 2 years before I got there, it was a D-rated school, and then my year, they were like, okay, we got to turn around, otherwise, we're going to be an F school. And so I saw firsthand tutoring is monumental for students. And you said something in your presentation about how there's $1.5 million available for tutoring for these schools. How do schools find out about that? What does that look like? If you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Excellent question. So if a school has a DRF letter grade, they have access to these funds, and the school can apply and then provide tutoring on site at the school for any of their students, but also any parent at a DRF school can go and apply to use that money also. So any parent at a DRF school can use that state school tutoring fund to get tutoring for their child. Unfortunately, it was kind of passed around a little bit within the department, and so didn't get broadcast out there as widely as it should. We're trying to remedy that and make sure schools are aware that they have access to those funds.
So who did they reach out to?
Right now, it's Ebony McKinney in standards. So she's one of our math standards people. So at the Department of Ed, you can do a search online for Failing Schools Tutoring Fund, and it will come up. Thank you.
I have one more question. If that's okay.
That's absolutely.
This stuff fascinates me. So when I want to highlight one of the statistics that you put in the presentation, which was 100% success in improving academic results at a higher rate than the state average. How does that also look? And it's okay if it's too early because I know this just started. How does that also look for kids that are college and career ready? So you know if that's also if there's an increase in the number of kids that are going to college because of this, or if is that something that I might just be?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I don't know that we've measured that yet. We've really been looking at what are the increases. We really focus on math and English proficiency rates. And so we try and make sure that those proficiency rates are increasing at a rate faster than the state's increasing them so that we know that we've had a real impact. It has been around long enough that we should be able to look at some data on that. I may try and find some data on that and get back to you.
Yeah, I'd love to know that, but that's a very impressive statistic. It's something that we're very proud of. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments from this side? Superintendent Horn.
Thank you, Michelle. You've indicated there are a number of different programs for school improvement, many, and you ended up focusing on Project Momentum. And I know you did that through a process that you developed when you were chair of the Education Committee in the House of Representatives. I think the board members would love to hear the process that you used and how you arrived at Project Momentum.
Sure. So I spent a lot of time studying districts or states, countries that had gone from fairly average to low performing to high performing within a short amount of time and then maintained it. So I looked at places like Finland, British Columbia, Poland recently has made a big jump. And I looked at what they had been doing, what were those commonalities. I had studied it with another group of legislators, and I had also done a lot of reading on what were those things. And so then when Project Momentum came to Arizona and we started seeing those results, I mean, it's hard to argue with 100% success. It's just hard to not be impressed with that. But when I looked at it, they were doing those same things that we saw be successful in those other countries. Some of the things that those countries had adopted successfully and had to fight for in many cases were some of the same things that they were doing. And so that's really how I came to the conclusion that this is something, not only that, but the two men that developed Project Momentum really are all about sharing it. Everything they do, they will share with everyone. There's none of this proprietary, no, this is ours, hands off. They really want this to be successful for all students. And so they were very eager to work with us and happy to work with us and to share everything that they have with us and to allow us to make it ours. And so that combination of things came together for me to say, this is what we need to be doing. And this is where we need to be using our school improvement resources.
Member Meyerson, please.
I'm sorry, I had a comment. I could wait till after Julia. Okay, well, this is my comment. Our school improvement program also includes a massive program headed by Santa Cruz to teach teachers how to teach English immersion. And she first did that for me in 2003 when I was first elected to this office. And under her massive program to educate teachers, our percentage of English language learners who became proficient in English in 1 year was 31% on average over the years. Under bilingual, before we took office, it was 4%. Since then, some dual language programs exceed 4%, but they're not within shouting distance of 31%. And so she's doing that again now to improve our schools by being sure that teachers are teaching English immersion correctly. And the data, notwithstanding all the things we've heard, the data show 31% versus 4% or maybe 9%. To me, is compelling data. And finally, there's a study in Education Next, sponsored by Harvard and Stanford, that found that students who've been in English immersion outperform students who've been in bilingual in everything they measured: graduation from high school, admission to college, average income, and in admission to high status occupations exceeded by almost 2 to 1. So that's also important data. But in any case, in the near future, hopefully, we will have a court decision on whether any of these can defy a voter protected initiative.
Thank you, Superintendent Horn. Member Meyerson.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur, members of the board, Associate Superintendent Udall. I so appreciate your presentation and just really excited about the results that are coming out of just in the short time that we've been engaging in this work here. I had three just sort of really, one really technical question and then two larger questions. The first is on the graph, I guess maybe overarching, though, confirming what I heard you say, which was that even schools that are not part of the improvement will be able to have the positive change related to the CNA. Is that accurate?
Yes, that CNA will replace the old comprehensive needs assessment that was required for everybody.
Right, well, thank you, first and foremost. And again, to just have it be really aligned to the practices that we are already doing in school is just a huge positive, so thank you for that. So then along those lines, on those scatter plots that you showed, which is super exciting to be able to see that comparison data, a question that I had is, are you going to be able to also sort that by subgroup? So just in addition to the free and reduced price lunch, can you also see how your school does according to another school's subgroup data and kind of do that comparison as well?
So that's a great question. There will be several different graphs. I was showing you one of them. There will be graphs for subgroups as well. Most of the ones we have for subgroups are bar graphs that compare your different subgroups within the school. But we'll have to look and see if we want to add some that compare the subgroups across other as a scatter plot.
Yeah.
So we will look into that.
That would be great. And then the second is we try and create versions of those types of graphs for ourselves. And obviously we don't have all of the fabulous technical resources that you all do at the department. And so the other thing that we spend time thinking about is schools in that sort of upper right-hand quadrant, so schools that have a high free and reduced price lunch and high proficiency. And so one maybe just suggestion is for schools also in the bottom right quadrant, if there is some opportunity to pair those schools with schools in that upper right-hand quadrant, so that I think something that we have found is that until you really see excellence and you're in that classroom and you're seeing schools that have very similar demographics that you do and excelling at the highest levels, the sort of opportunities to both spur that change and that kind of inspiration to improve are dramatically heightened. And so I don't know if there's a way to take that pairing of schools in the bottom right-hand quadrant and schools in the top right-hand quadrant.
So that's an excellent suggestion. That's part of what Project Momentum does, is they pair those principal partners that I talked about are principals that have served similar or are serving similar schools. Sometimes it's a current principal at a similar school with a similar demographic, so that they get that perspective. And some of them have done site visits back and forth to get more of that, but absolutely.
Great. And then the last question is also, obviously a lot of this is letter grade based, it sounds like, in terms of sort of how you're determining the allocation. And as I'm sure you saw also with letter grades this past year, while letter grades have boosted, certainly, there are also still a lot of schools that maintained a significant amount of growth, but their proficiency was still quite low. And so wondering if there's any opportunity to use some of these funds that even though schools might have, a CB or an A rating, the proficiency, especially in some of the subgroups that you've highlighted, are still very low, or they might be able to allocate some of the Project Momentum resources. Because again, while their letter grades might be high, their proficiency is still really low.
Right. Right now, the funding streams we are using for it don't allow that, because they have to either qualify for federal or state school improvement, because each of those funding streams have specific criteria tied to them. We would love to have funding to do more, but for right now, we don't.
Thank
President Kaur, I have a question if it's time.
I don't think we're hearing what,
Can they hear us?
doesn't sound like it.
Hello, everyone.
Go ahead. Yeah, Dr. Clay, did you have a question or no?
I did. Me and Miss Member Kravitz, we were saying that we didn't know if you could hear us or not because we were trying to get your attention.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I'm glad we kept everything appropriate there. Thank you. I do have a question and a comment.
Yeah, please go ahead.
First of all, thank you, Ms. Adol, for the wonderful presentation. It was great, inspiring, and motivating. It's going to help us move westward as far as education is concerned. My questions, one is, how do you involve the county superintendents? I was looking at your slide that had to do with the systems of support. And I totally and truly believe that county superintendents need to or should be more involved in this, because we could be the conduit to share information with the others in our educational ecosystem, which as you probably know, consists of more than just our educators, students, and parents. It includes our businesses and community members and all the people who would support us. We can also be the silo breakers, because as we all know, sometimes education and the things that are happening in education, we know the words to the songs, but we need to teach other people the words also, which means that trying to get that information out to everyone else is very imperative. Again, that's where county superintendents can be involved. So my biggest thing is, in your systems of support, I would like to see the county superintendents more involved, because we are definitely a part of that educational ecosystem. that can help us move forward. Even better is not the right word, but could help us move forward better than what we're doing now, kind of refining it and evolving what we're doing right now. So my thing is consider bringing the county superintendents into this so that we can help move things forward. And I know with myself, I know what schools in my county need improvement, but being a part of that is what my concern is. A lot of times county superintendents want to be a part of it because as statute says, we do assist schools in meeting their yearly adequate progress goals, and also a vast amount of other things. So we would like to be used, county superintendents would like to be used to augment and to even evolve this wonderful initiative. Love it, love it, love it, and would like to see the county superintendents be more involved in what's going on and the process of even assisting.
Associate Superintendent Udall.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Clay. One of the things we've been working on across the department is getting some people out across the state positioned, and I think you've been aware of the efforts that we're making to put people in the four corners of the state working hand in hand with those county superintendents in those areas to provide professional development, to provide some of those systems of support, exactly what you're talking about, that will work with our groups from the agency and alongside those county superintendents. And I believe we've been talking about putting one in Cochise County even. So we're excited to partner in that way and in any way that we can.
Thank you so much. I will have to put a shout out and a kudos to that. That was amazing when it was brought to me. We're looking at putting one of your people in our office to service the southeastern portion of Arizona. Thank you very much. We are very, very excited about this. I believe education is going to move forward in Arizona. We are working together wonderfully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Clay.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Any additional questions or comments? Yeah, please, Dr. Hagerman.
So I have a question about the state improvement versus the federal improvement. Do you have any insight on why someone would be like a D or F school but not qualify for CSI? I'm guessing it has to do with growth and proficiency or something?
It has to do with the criteria for each. So for example, the college and career readiness, especially at the high school, is heavily weighted in the state school improvement model or in the DNF, A through F model, but that doesn't come into play at all in the federal model. So it really depends on which model you're looking at, what the different criteria are.
Are you seeing like the high schools as the area, or is it a K-12 thing? I mean, initially as I was sitting here thinking about it, I'm thinking growth how does growth relate in the federal definition?
So growth is part of it, and there's some business rules available online that tell exactly the formulas. The formulas just don't match up. They're not the same formula. They both use proficiency and growth, but the formulas are different and it ends up with different schools. We actually see a lot of elementaries that are DNF that are not in federal school improvement. I think more elementaries than high schools even. And we haven't looked real closely at why those are different. We just know the criteria is different, and so we're focusing on slightly different things. It ends up being different schools.
Member Kervikis, did you have a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Hello, Mrs. Udall. It's nice to see you again. I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, and thank you for this presentation. I just have a couple questions. The disaggregation of data, as you know and have already discussed, is super important. I have been requesting and pushing the board and the department to really start disaggregating the special education or students with disabilities subgroup by the 13 federally identified disabilities. I think there are distinct differences between, let's say, a child with ADD and a child with autism. And often we kind of conflate all of that looking at that group. And especially as you indicated, and it's been true for a long time, unfortunately, it is that subgroup that triggers a lot of the school improvement. So I think it's worth really starting to dig in. And if for no other reason, I think we can also start using that disaggregated data to activate groups in our communities, the parents of kids with autism, and really bring them into the fold for the solutions. And that's was my request or suggestion. My second question is, I'm really intrigued with the board members know I've often said, what do we want students to know and do? I've seen that a lot nationally. So I totally agree that that is the right question and probably the first question. But what I'm interested is, as long as you continue to move forward, having you come back and tell us what you're hearing, because there's got to be, I don't know if it's an intersection or parallel with our state standards, which of course is something that the board thinks about and is very involved in. Because one of the things I've seen happen at the local level in other schools in other states is, of course, the state standards always stay in place. Those are critical, and that's what we want students to be exposed to. But often they end up identifying what, and they all call them different things: competencies, power standards, meta topics, and kind of these core ideas. And I think that conversation, when you have that kind of data, or that even that anecdotal feedback, could really help us improve and fine tune our standards reviews and conversations. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, that as we go and work with these schools and see where the discrepancies are, where the breakdowns are, that we share that back and forth, that we share that as much as possible and make decisions based on that data. When we talk about what do students need to know and be able to do, we're really talking about, have you broken down those standards to a point where the teacher and the parent and the principal and the student understand what those objectives are? Can you break those standards down into objectives? Can you figure out which ones are the power standards, if you will? What are those important things that required for them to be successful moving forward? And I think as we work with schools throughout the state on that, and especially underperforming schools, we will get a clearer and clearer picture of where we need emphasis and where there can be less emphasis.
Well, to your point, thank you, Mr. President, board members. I remember a presentation with a superintendent in Utah. And what his story was, he brought the 3 Algebra 1 teachers together. And I'm going to make up the numbers, I don't know what they were, and said, okay, here are the 50 state standards on Algebra 1. And as you know, there's kind of different levels and degrees of complexity to those. And he said, okay, I want the 3 of you to agree on what are the things that they have to be able to know and do to be ready for Algebra 2. And that's why it wasn't even just a breakdown, it was an elevation. So students and parents said, okay, these are, then I'm making up numbers, 10 things that they cannot move to Algebra 2 unless they can actually master that. So it was kind of an opposite conversation that I heard a lot.
Thank you, Member Kervikis. Superintendent Horn.
I just want to thank you for the outstanding work you do, Michelle.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to do it.
Thank you. Appreciate the report. Appreciate the good news whenever we can inject good news, because if nothing else, we are about school improvement. That is the crux of our work. And I would echo Superintendent Horn's remarks and other members of the board, and thank you for your report and sharing of the good work being done. So with that, I'm going to move us on to item 5B, which is presentation and discussion of the Arizona Ascending Graduate Initiative. This is also for information only, and I believe Jessica Mueller will present. Is that not the case, Director Ross?
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, it is. I'm just going to kick off Jessica's presentation.
Very good, sure.
So just as a refresher, the board had asked staff to look at a project that would help the board sort of identify a North Star, a lens by which the board would look at its important work. We looked at examples from across the country at multiple states, and the first step that most states followed, and the first step that we were encouraged to follow, was to offer a survey statewide. So that survey was offered. It asked 3 questions, actually the same question 3 times, I should say. What word or short phrase comes, do you think of when you think of an Arizona graduate? And so we gathered that information, which Jessica is going to share today. It's also in the packet, the word cloud. And this is, there's a couple things in the packet, a word cloud, and then sort of an example graphic that we are using, which could be the next step. And then what we're asking today is for you all, we asked you all to come into the meeting having considered the pillars that were covered here, what you liked, what you would change, what you would add, and then that will push staff to the next step, which is sort of putting that into a organized graphic, bringing it back to the board, and then sharing with stakeholders. And so I do want to emphasize, again, this is really, we're doing this transparently and publicly, but it's an internal process to help the board generate its North Star.
Thank you, Director Ross, and welcome Jessica Mueller, please.
Thank you, President Corr, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. As Sean teed up for me, the survey was opened after our March 20th board meeting. We held that open until July 2023 and really did a lot of outreach, specifically with the disability-oriented community, parent community, and community member community, plus quite a bit of outreach with higher education and some other education stakeholders. We received 283 responses. It was pretty spread across the PK-12 educators, the PK-12 administrators, parents, higher education, and community members. No responses from students in this survey. However, as you see, the Student Advisory Council is on this agenda, so that could be an opportunity to engage them in the future if the board chooses to take that direction, to present this information on this initiative to them. These drafted domains from that word cloud is just an example of where we may categorize these things. If there's something that you wanted to change, as Sean says, when you're looking at it, group them differently. If you wanted to have more information about what the different stakeholders looked at, so if you only wanted to look at the community members group or higher education, we can share that information with you as well. The drafted domains that we put on there from the word cloud of all the responses was initiative, critical thinking and problem solving, transferable knowledge, community engagement, which can be thought of in a lot of ways. It was reflected in a lot of different terms, so that was a little bit harder one to capture, and team player, really working well with others and collaborating well in your community. Also in the board materials, not in this printout, but online, there was examples of local, which was the Sunnyside Unified School District, and a national example of those directions that education agencies have taken with their graduate initiatives. Recently, we met with Vermont, which is on those materials, to talk to them about how their graduate initiative developed and what were the steps that they're taking going forward, and where are they at with it today. So what they did after their survey and drafting these domains is they started to look at what are the performance indicators of those domains. What can those things look like, and what would the instructional practices for those performance indicators be? So deferring to your direction then on this item going forward.
Thank you so much. I'll see if there are any thoughts or comments. I'll start to my left this time. Any? No? Anyone online? Member Kravickas or Dr. Clay, any thoughts or comments?
Dr. Corr.
Oh yeah, please, Dr. Clay. Yeah.
Dr. Corr, members of the board, again, another great initiative to move us westward as a educational ecosystem. I love it. I see only great things, and what I really like about it is that it's simple, and everyone will be able to understand it. I won't have to go anywhere and try to explain it or interpret it. This is going to be a great project. It's very transparent and very inclusive, and I like where we're going with it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clay. I thank you. Give me a resilient problem solver, and I will hire them for any position in this organization, because that's what we need. So I think we're on the right track, and I appreciate that very much. Let's see, we're right around the 2-hour mark, which may necessitate the need for folks to stretch their legs, get some coffee, use the restroom. So I'll pause us here with the consent of the group and ask that we take the next 13 minutes to do any of those activities listed above or anything else, and we'll start again at 12:10 right back here.
Hello, 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 hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hello, hello, hello. 1, 2. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, testing. Testing, testing. Yeah. Yes, I'm the only one. Working on cool stuff.
Mic test, uno, dos, tres. That's pretty loud.
All righty, I love the good energy in the room, and folks, Shannon, I'm gonna reconvene us. So we'll pick up obviously right where we left off, and I'll start with 5C. This is presentation discussion regarding the creation of the State Board Student Advisory Council. Director Ross.
Core Superintendent Horn, members of the board, I'm very excited for this item. In fact, it's going to be presented virtually by Shannon Etz, who is one of our project directors on staff and who is fantastic and is going to be spearheading the work. So Shannon, do you want to go ahead and talk about the Student Advisory Council?
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Ross. Thank you, President Core, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. I'm super excited about this project. We are starting a student advisory panel. This is going to include 11th and 12th grade students from across Arizona. We're including kiddos from all different school types. So whether they go to a district school, charter school, they're an ASA student, they might be being homeschooled or in a private school. Our other category is an online district or charter school. We really want to encourage students from all the different school models to apply for the panel, to be able to give us some feedback and insight from their experiences as Arizona students. Our goal with the panel is to be able to bring different questions that you as a board might have to this group of students, as well as to expose them to some of the workings of state government, give them a little bit of insight to that, and hopefully pull them over to the state government side one day in their futures. Currently, the application is open. It's been open since, I believe, August 15th. It's going to close on September 5th at 5 p.m. We wanted to give students a couple of weekends so that they had time to work on their applications. And then we will go ahead and announce the students that are selected for the panel on Monday, September 11th. And then we'll have our first meeting the following week. Right now, most of our applications are not surprisingly coming from Maricopa County. It's the most populated county, but we have gotten a couple of applications from Pima, Yavapai, Yuma County, Apache, and Coconino. So we're really excited about that and hoping some other students from other counties in the state will apply. Yeah, I think that's as far as my update goes, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Fantastic. Super to hear that we'll have interest from all around the state. Any questions or comments from any members of the board? Yeah, Dr. Hagerman, please.
Just a comment. I'm very excited to have student board advisory helping us out, and I'm glad we're getting this going.
Great. Yeah, Vice President Haley.
Oh, thank you so much, and agree. I just echo Dr. Hagerman's comments. Thank you so much to Sean and to you, Shannon, and everyone else for the creation of this. I wasn't able to hear, how are you going to get the word out so we make sure we have a real broad swath of participants? Because you guys mentioned in the board packet that kids from all over the state, from all different types of learning backgrounds. How do we make sure we reach those students?
So Shannon, we're having a little trouble hearing you, so I'm going to answer if that's okay. Okay, so Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, Vice President Haley, we are disseminating the announcement and the application through several listservs that we have at the board. One of which is a superintendent and principals listserv, which allows us to reach districts and charter schools. We have an ESA listserv, which allows us to reach ESA families. And then we're doing outreach to private schools. And then there's a homeschool association, which we're using as well. So trying to get the word out to as many folks as possible. I just want to kind of hit a couple of the bullets again quickly in case it was hard to hear.
Yeah, that'd be great, okay. Director Ross.
So again, this will be the first time the board has had a student advisory council. Some state boards across the country actually have a seat for students. Not having that with this board, we did think it was really important to have student voices present. Several board members over the past few months in meetings have said something like, I would love to know what students think about this. You know, the decision making by the board is really impacting their lives on a daily basis, and so it'd be great to have them present. There's really three sort of prongs to this. The first is that they are an advisory council in every sense of the word, in that if the board has an issue they would like to get feedback from the student group on, that can happen. They will also be able to choose an issue or two that they will research, look into, and bring sort of to the board's attention, either for action or maybe to spotlight the issue if it's something maybe out of the purview of the board. And then as Shannon was saying, you know, the kids who apply for this are looking to be active in state government, looking to be civically engaged. And so we want to reward that, and we want to make sure to give them a sense of the breadth of state government. So every quarter, we're going to set up meetings with folks like a superintendent, for example, or the president of a community college, a rock star teacher, you know, the head of a charter school. We're going to set up meetings and you know, get them to see all of the many possibilities for them as they move forward. I just want to mention that you know, this is something we're really excited about, but most importantly, it really comes from a kid. I had a student email me out of the blue and say, hey, I've been doing some research and I've seen the work of the board, and I was wondering if there's a seat for students on the board. And I responded, well, not in Arizona, but and we started talking back and forth, and then we scheduled a call, a Zoom call. I did not know that she was calling me from Japan. She was in Japan with some family, and at one point I stopped and I went, what time is it there? She said 2 a.m, as chipper as she could. It was really an exciting call. She talked a lot about what she was looking for and what she thought students were looking for, and we sort of took that idea and ran with it. And so at some point I will have you meet that student, and get to know the whole panel as well. So again, 10-member panel pulling from students from every educational model: public, district, charter, private, AOI, online, or educated in the home. And then we're going to start with 10 kids, 11th and 12th graders. Those 11th graders will move up next year so that there's some institutional knowledge. And then my hope is that this is something that lasts forever for the board. And so we're very, very excited and very thankful to Shannon for taking the lead.
Indeed. Thank you, Director Ross. I'll certainly share my experience. We try to accentuate the student voice during our board meetings here at the college, and we recently transitioned our bookstore away from a brick and mortar on-site bookstore. That entire process was led by our students. How they buy books, how they want to buy books, And it was a true eye opener, right down to you'll also have an opportunity to tour through our brand new building behind us. The name of that building came to us from our students. So I think you're always in a good position. I love visiting with our Student Government Association, and I will share with you, no softball questions when you get in front of the Student Government Association, from the cost of fries in the cafeteria to parking to availability of advising. They'll let you know what their experience is, and then it's our job to improve it. So I commend this idea. I'm wildly supportive. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Member Katniss, please.
Thank you, President Core. Just a question. Is it possible to also ensure that we have representatives from all across the state?
Superintendent Horn, Member Katniss. Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. So during the application process, we are looking for kiddos. Shannon mentioned it. I think we have applications from Maricopa, Pima, Yavapai, and Yuma and Apache, and we are looking for folks. So this is actually also a nice little, like, hey, if you're in Graham or Greenlee, like, we'd love some kiddos from those areas as well. So that is a priority, that the panel will not only reflect the varying educational opportunities for students, but also represent the whole state.
And some tribal communities as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
I just have a feeling that Dr. Clay has taken that as a personal challenge to get a representative from Cochise. I think she's on the phone now, I bet.
Excuse me, President Core.
Go ahead, Dr. Clay.
I'm on my other screen. I'm pushing it out. It's going. I just told my staff, Facebook, all websites right now.
I knew that. I somehow knew that. Thank you. I'm glad you're doing that. Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much. Then I'll move us on to 5D, presentation and discussion of the school year 2022-23 accountability appeals process, procedures, and timeline for school to appeal its letter grade. Director Ross.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, this item will be presented by Jessica Mueller. Just to set the stage a bit, we are entering A through F accountability season. And just to kind of table set what that means, the A through F technical advisory committees all received presentations in the August meetings on possible cut scores from Sean Smith and Yasin Fahmy, who are the accountability team over at ADE, a part of the accountability team. They will vote on a recommendation in the September meeting. That recommendation will be brought to the board in the board's September meeting. You all will have that same presentation delivered by Sean and his amazing team. And then you will vote in October on cut scores. Later that week, the department will release the letter grades to the public, to schools, and then that immediately kicks open the appeals window, which will close on November 15th. And I want to take a second, one, to thank Jessica, who is invaluable and has such a deep knowledge of A through F and the accountability system and the appeal system. She's amazing. But also I want to take a moment to really thank the 3 board members who volunteered to be on the appeals committee, Member Meyerson, Dr. Hagerman, Dr. Clay. We are so thankful. It is not an easy thing to do because it's done sort of during the holidays in November. And so we're very, very thankful. So I'll kick it to Jessica to talk about the policy for appeals because there have been some changes.
Thank you, Director Ross, President Core, Superintendent Horn, and members. Some modifications are before the draft of the ADIF appeals policies and procedures. It's information only today, and at a later meeting, either September or October, the process will be finally approved by the board. Some of the modifications came from committee members, some came from the field and sort of talks about after appeals and through the appeals process. There may be provisions changing for the citing of incorrect data based on feedback from the Department of Education, from Sean Smith and Yasin Fahmy. We added examples and definitions for all grounds of appeal and collapsed those a little bit. Before there was environmental issues and school or community emergency, we sort of collapsed those, finding that schools didn't really differentiate those from each other, and added examples of what the documentation might look like to support that appeal application. as well changing this year is the proposal to have committee determine if the appeal will be a document review only or a question and answer type of appearance, where the questions will be provided to the school appealing their letter grade before they're before the committee, so they can prepare their responses and collect any information that is relevant for the committee members to review. There's also some parameters around the movement of letter grades based on the type of appeal. This is really challenging, and the committee is seeing a school tragedy, which really pulls at the heartstrings for all of us, and that's occurring, and we recognize the challenges that the school face. But things like that will be recommended for a movement of one letter grade, whereas things like incorrect data is really based on the underlying data and could move multiple letter grades. There will be other changes, sort of support documents for the field this year in the process. We're going to add FAQ guidance to the policies and procedures. We're also going to be looking for an exemplary appeal from previous years, and with permission from the school, we'll create a walkthrough video of sort of explaining the attributes that the committee is considering when they're looking at the appeal application. So sort of that, here's what supporting documentation could look like, and this is how it's evaluated for the recommendation that will go before the board at the December board meeting. So any questions?
Any questions?
I just commend all the hard work that's been dedicated to this. The examples, I think, are so helpful. I just remember for my first appeals meeting last year, there were plenty of situations where it did pull at the heartstrings, and we had a robust debate and discussion about a handful of situations. So I'm really grateful that you all went through this process, and so thank you for presenting this information.
Anyone else? Yeah, Member Cantonese, please.
Thank you, President Corr. Thank you for that information. I also just want to reiterate a point after last year. There were some schools that didn't have a lot of time to prepare before they went into the appeals process, so just making sure that there's an adequate amount of time. I just want to reiterate that from what some schools had told us afterwards.
Thank you so much.
So Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, Member Catanese. So the couple things are being done proactively. We meet with the department's accountability team every other week and talk about ways that we can make the process more transparent, smoother for schools. So one of the things that we are working with the department on, and I want to give a huge shout out to Sean Smith and his team, is when they can identify a potential issue based on their end, like the data, like there was we found a discrepancy. Instead of waiting for that to go to appeals, we were like, no, we're going to call those schools now. Let's get the correct data. Let's fix it. The entire goal is to have the cleanest first release of letter grades, because you can't put that genie back in the bottle. You know, if a C comes out and it's supposed to be an A, you know, we don't want schools to be in that position. So they're really proactively working on that. They've also increased the amount of communication they have with schools as reminders of when like CCRI and things like that are due. And then we are, the reality is right now, Dr. Hagerman tested this for us, the business rules for letter grades were adopted by you all back in April, which was 8 months earlier than that's ever happened. The possible cut scores were reviewed by the ATAC in the August 7th meeting. Those meetings are open, so those materials are public. So schools now have the ability to, because the business rules included the mathematical formulas, schools now have the ability to have their data folks run through their letter grades, look at the options for cut scores, and know exactly where they would fall. And then I believe, Representative Udall, you were telling me in a meeting the other day that schools actually can also go in and see where their percentages are on their component scores. So on the ADE accountability website, there's a way for schools to go in and see their percentages on each component, and then now they have the possible cut scores. And the reason we've been trying to get out ahead on that as much as possible is so that schools could identify if there were a discrepancy in their data, reach out to the department right away, fix that discrepancy, and then we have a clean, first release of letter grades. So we are really hopeful that there's a smaller number of appeals this year, and then again, by making these changes, the goal is to have that process be as smooth and predictable as possible. Member Catanese, does that answer your question? Sorry. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Director Ross. Any? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Going to move us on to item 5E. This is presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding standard setting committee's recommendation cut scores for performance levels for the MSAA Science, Arizona Statewide Alternative Science Assessment pursuant to ASRS 38-431.03A2. The board may vote to convene an executive session, which will not be open to the public, for discussion or consideration of records exempt by law from public inspection. So again, we're going to have I'll have Director Ross set it up for us, but we'll have a presentation. And if there are questions from the board of a kind of a philosophical or general nature, we can stay here in open session. If there are more technical details, we will then convene in executive session if that is the case. So I think I've set it up correctly, but I'll turn it over to Director Ross to clean up any mess I may have made and to clarify further.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that is completely correct. So just as an example, last year at the retreat, the board voted on MSAA cut scores and ended up not going into executive session because there were no technical questions. They voted on the floor. So with us today is one of my favorite people, Audra Amata from the Arizona Department of Education. She oversees assessment at the department and is going to talk to us about cut scores. Audra?
Great, thank you. So we have been down this pathway before, and so again, we wanted to look at our data. We called our cut scores last year provisional. We had one more year of student data. We had other state partners and entities join MSAA and administer the MSAA science part this time. So there was, additional student information and data. And so we went through the same process, but we added in an external observer who is very knowledgeable about the process and the content of alternate assessments. She's a national expert on many TACs and just very knowledgeable about these processes. So she was an external observer throughout this entire standard setting process, and it was held in Maine. And I do have slides. You've seen most of these slides before. I also just have, I think, one or two at the end about the external observer. But other than that, it was the same process that we did the last time. Just I do have impact data, and if you wanted to see that impact data or the actual cut scores, we would have to go into executive session, so they're not part of this PowerPoint. And I can do that. The levels are near where they were before. I felt very confident in that. We had Arizona educators there, a part of this. We had our psychometrician part of the standard setting method observing, and our state lead for the program there. So again, I have a lot of confidence in this process that we used. It was called the ID match method, and we determined all of the cuts needed for the different levels for MSAA science. I think you can go to the next slide. Here were some of the committee people. You can go to the next slide. A little bit more detailed about the standard setting process. Again, this is the same process we used in the past. And next slide. And we were really looking at having our committee members, which were educators as part of any of the states that administered the science, really hone in on the content of the assessment. What is a student required to know and do in order to be proficient? And those definitions come from our performance level descriptors. And that is something that we have for all of our statewide assessments. The educators get very familiar with them, and they use those descriptors as they're going through that standard setting process. So it's based on the content of the test. Next slide. Again, we have that final data impact. And I can show you that if you would like to go to that one, we'd have to go to executive session. So I don't know. I'm going to push it back over to President Core, members of the board, Superintendent Horn, to determine the next steps.
This is Sean. Dr. Kors, Horn, members of the board. Could you just give a quick summary of what MSAA science is?
Sure. MSAE Science is our state's alternate assessment. It stands for the Multi-State Alternate Assessment, and we added in science. So since 2015, we administered ELA and mathematics to students with significant cognitive disabilities who meet the eligibility requirements to participate in this state assessment. And as we saw, we had AZ Sci new to our state since we had new standards. That meant we had to develop a new alternate assessment as well. And it is just part of the MSAA collaborative with all the other states that are choosing to administer the science portion of the test.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, now would be the time to determine if there are questions or if there's more information the board would like to receive from Audra, then we would go into executive session.
Sure. Thank you, Executive Director Ross. So any questions for Audra? And again, depending on the nature and specificity of the question, we may have to move into executive session. Vice President Haley?
I would be interested in seeing the impact data. So if folks are amenable to going into executive session, I would like to see that information, if that's possible.
It is absolutely possible. So yeah, with the desire from Vice President Haley and perhaps others to see impact data, I think at this point, do I need a motion to go to executive session, or do I?
I don't believe you do. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Yes.
Okay, yeah, let's just play it safe. Do it. I believe I have a motion from, okay, do I have a second?
I move.
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. All in favor of moving into executive session, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. I believe we're going to set up in Francis Moore's boardroom, which is where we had the breakfast set up, just kind of adjacent, right behind us here.
For board members who are with us virtually, Jessica, I believe, has already or will be sending you a link. Oh, already sent a link. Okay, perfect.
Thank you. I'll join in that session.
And member Clay, great, okay.
We wore them down.
Yeah, yes, we did.
We should always have an over-under. What's the point at which we wear down the audience?
Yuma loves us, only till about noon.
Till about 10:15-ish. Like 10:15 love us.
I think they're also getting their fries right now.
They just started a run for the food.
President Corr, we do have a quorum right now.
Thank you very much. Then I'm going to bring us back into an open session at 1:11. And at this point, I will ask for a motion to approve the Standard Setting Committee's recommended cut scores for performance levels for the MSAA Science Arizona Statewide Alternative Science Assessment. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Vice President Haley, do I have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Any further conversation? Hearing and seeing none. Oh, yes, Superintendent Horn.
I know we lost our audience, so we need more controversy toward the end of our meetings.
Any other comments or questions? No. Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I'm going to move us on to item 6, which is called to the public. This is once again the time to comment on items on the consent portion of the enforcement actions. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes today. Director Ross, have we received any such requests?
Corps, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we have one request for this call to the public, Michael Allerid.
Michael, are you with us? Okay, Michael is. We'll connect with you in a sec.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Hi, can everybody hear me? This is Michael Allerid.
I can hear you. Please go ahead, Michael.
Okay, great. So my name is Michael Allerid. I represent Evelyn Andrade, who is listed in your agenda, and you're taking up her matter today. I just wanted to make a public comment regarding her case because I think it's an issue that the board might need to consider in a way that's greater than Ms. Andrade's case. But essentially, she's before the board regarding a plea agreement that she entered where she agreed to plead guilty in a criminal case having nothing to do with her duties as an educator, but outside of the classroom, where she pled guilty to classic undesignated offenses. Now, the undesignated offense that she pled guilty to that is at issue here for the board is aggravated assault. And that is listed as one of the offenses in the Board of Regulations 1307 that states if a person is convicted of that crime, then they shall be revoked. The issue, though, is that if you look at the Regulation 1307 and the entire list of those enumerated offenses, they are all felonies. And specifically, you'll notice that it does not include assault. Assault is just a misdemeanor, but if it's aggravated assault, then it's a felony. So the only thing listed is aggravated assault. The reason why that's an issue is because the law changed in Arizona, where now, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statute 13604, undesignated class 6 felonies are now treated as misdemeanors for all purposes, including licensing purposes, until such time as they may be designated a felony down the road. If, for example, the person were to not complete probation successfully. So the reason why that's an issue in Ms. Andrade's case is because she's pled guilty to a class 6 undesignated felony for aggravated assault. But for all intents and purposes, it's essentially a misdemeanor. If it's a misdemeanor and it's an assault, it's not an enumerated offense that would be automatic revocation of her license. So because it's a legal issue, I wanted to have a public comment on that, so that that is something that the board could consider, that as it's an undesignated offense, it should be treated as a misdemeanor, and it should not be an automatic revocation. With regard to Ms. Andrade, she is a kindergarten teacher, was a kindergarten teacher. Her principal at her school is in full support of her coming back, and is basically, hoping and waiting that she gets her license back, and then also gets her fingerprint clearance card back so that she can come back to work. But I remember a comment earlier from one of the speakers talking about a shortage of teachers, and that you shouldn't be getting rid of teachers for a lack of performance. You should be training them. Well, this is a situation where it's essentially a misdemeanor that she has on her record, so we shouldn't be automatically revoking the license of an educator for a misdemeanor that has nothing to do with the classroom. And so this type of offense should not be included in an automatic revocation. So that's my comment with regard to Ms. Andrade, and I thank the board for your time.
Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate that. That was the only request to comment, Director Ross. Thank you. I'm going to move us on then to, in fact, the consent agenda for certification enforcement actions. If it meets the pleasure of the group, I would accept a single motion for the consent agenda. And so do I have a motion to approve items 7A1 through 7A23, 7B1 and 7B2, and 7C1 and 7C2? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Hagerman, do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Haley, any comments or discussion on the consent agenda for enforcement actions? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. We'll move us on now to item 8. Once again, we will have a call to the public. This is once again time for to comment on items on the general session portion of enforcement actions. All speakers will once again be limited to 3 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we have up first is Bill Richards from Richards and Moskowitz, speaking, I believe, about Calvin Elevation.
Yes. Good afternoon, Dr. Core and Superintendent Horn and members of the board. I'm Bill Richards. My firm and I have been retained as outside counsel for the board, representing the board in actions before the PPAC. With respect to the request for reconsideration by Mr. Calvin Ellaby, the board made its decision to adopt the PPAC recommendation to deny respondent Ellaby's application and to suspend his certification for 3 years. A reconsideration is only appropriate if there exists reason to conclude that the board's decision was arbitrary and capricious. But here, that decision was based on layers of evidence of multiple violations by Mr. Ellaby of Bob O'Keefe School District policies, of his training there, and of his direct instruction concerning the sponsorship of school fundraising activities, the management of funds raised by such activities, the procurement rules for school-related purchases, and the use of a district credit card. Contrary to Mr. Ellaby's suggestions that the allegations against him were merely somehow the vindictive accusations of a malicious superintendent, the evidence against Mr. Ellaby came from a variety of sources. The PPAC saw records of communications to which Mr. Ellaby was a party. reports from other district officials about his actions, other district officials other than the superintendent. They saw the district training records for Mr. Ellaby, as well as the investigatory records and testimony of the former district superintendent, who became directly involved when Mr. Ellaby demonstrated a disregard for the district policies regarding financial issues. Mr. Ellaby was acting in an administrative and coaching capacity at a high school, and he received formal annual training, direct input and instruction from district administrative personnel, and he was given access to specific policy resources and manuals that could help him understand all of the directives he had otherwise received regarding these financial issues. Yet he ignored his obligation to turn in all monies raised in fundraising to the district, his obligation to keep records of and account for the specific use of money from fundraising, and he even helped initiate a raffle program knowing he was not authorized to do so. He failed to follow procurement policies. He ignored restrictions on the use of district credit cards, and he purposely used a school-issued credit card with vendors he had not been authorized to use, and even loaded his school credit card as a payment method on his personal Amazon account. The fact that Mr. Ellaby demonstrated such disregard for his training and instruction is especially troubling given Mr. Ellaby's personal history, which he did make known to the district before being hired. Mr. Ellaby is a disbarred lawyer. He had lost his license and was criminally convicted and spent time incarcerated for misuse of monies that did not belong to him in violation of the rules governing attorney conduct. The fact that someone with that sort of experience would then disregard rules, policies, and instructions from administrators that were intended to safeguard public funds is particularly concerning because he obviously should have learned the importance of safeguarding money and following rules regarding public funds that belong to others. The facts here indicate that he purposely decided to disregard that input, and Mr. Ellaby understood the rules and the consequences of violating them. As to his final allegation that his master's program at the time did not provide him the sort of instruction that he needed in financial rules and policies, the case was not premised on what he was provided in his master's program. It was premised on what he was provided by the district, specifically including through formal training and specific instruction he received from district personnel when they found him violating certain policies. Therefore, the decision of the board is well supported by a broad base of evidence and testimony, and that evidence shows violations of policies governing public funds and fundraising, which constitutes unprofessional conduct justifying the discipline that's been imposed by the board. No basis for further reconsideration exists. Thank you.
Thank you.
For Superintendent Horn, members of the board, up next we have Renee Ozapov, who I believe is representing Mr. Ellaby.
Good afternoon, Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. I am attorney Renee Ozapov, and I represent Calvin Ellaby Jr. During Mr. Ellaby's PPAC hearing, no evidence was presented on any of the issues regarding Mr. Ellaby's capacity as a classroom teacher. In fact, we just heard Mr. Richards say it was at his capacity as a coach and administrator. During the PPAC hearing, the testimony of Dr. Bond on the allegations of unprofessional conduct were not deemed credible. Notably, Dr. Bond is no longer with the BUSD and was released from his employment as the superintendent. Furthermore, he remains unemployed with any school district in Arizona. And Mr. Ellaby feels that Dr. Bond's testimony was motivated by a personal attack on Mr. Ellaby. Additionally, Mr. Ellaby produced 2 character witnesses from BUSD that supported Mr. Ellaby's character and his professionalism as an educator and refuted Dr. Bond's claims. Lastly, the PPAC members cited in their decision that Mr. Ellaby had received educational courses regarding finance during his master's program. At the time of the hearing, Mr. Ellaby could not confirm or deny, as this was difficult for him to remember his transcript. but upon review, Mr. Elby can confirm that he had not taken any of the financial courses before the instance in question. Mr. Elby takes responsibility that he should have sought out additional information regarding his fundraiser and raffle, but he requests the board to review and order a rehearing with the PPAC committee. Mr. Elby believes that his actions are not considered unprofessional conduct under the statute, specifically in regards to his role as a social studies teacher, and that this matter should be further discussed. So we ask the board to reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you.
For Superintendent Horn, members of the board, up next we have Calvin Ellaby Jr. Is Ellaby with us, Jessica? Okay.
Am I speaking now?
You may provide your comment now, Mr. Ellaby.
I'm sorry?
We can see you and hear you. Please.
Okay, I'm sorry. My name is Calvin Ellaby Jr. I have been a educator since 2009. And during the year of 21-22, I was appointed after an application to assistant principal. During that course of the year when I was assistant principal, I was also matriculating at Northern Arizona University for my master's in education with leadership with principal certification. During the time when I was assistant principal, I had not yet completed school finance, and I was unfamiliar with the UFR. My actions during that year of assistant principal, I wouldn't say it was rather turbulent, but I think it was rather a whole lot on my table, particularly in a small rural school district. Everything I did, and I believe I did, was in the interest of furthering the educational well-being of my students. I did nothing to heighten my ability. I did nothing to try to profit or increase my image. My only objective was to ensure that the kids who were under my charge were getting everything that they needed to get. I found out later that part of my obligations as far as assistant principal with regard to the fundraiser, that I should have followed the rules that were made available, but I was unfamiliar with those rules when it was presented to me. Only thing that was in front of me was to get the job done. I was not trying to circumvent. I was not trying to go anything around. But again, I was looking to ensure that the boys and the girls had money to buy food after sporting events. And I brought towels to ensure that the kids were able to use the towels, not to, use the towel and spread COVID by conduct. And that was the basis of the fundraiser. And that was all while I was assistant principal. During the years I was just solely teaching in the classroom, I want to say that my job was uneventful. I did nothing that brought reproach to the field of education or to anyone in education. Today, I am still teaching at Santa Cruz Valley Union High School, still given the responsibility to be engaged with students. All I'm asking is that you guys reconsider for rehearing or a redetermination of the penalty imposed. That's all I would ask.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Morgan Bigelow.
Hey, Morgan?
Hello, go ahead, we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, I think that we're actually on the wrong item. We're not to speak about Mr. Ellaby.
Mr. Bigelow, would you like to address the board on any of the enforcement actions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, this is Nicholas Enoch. I'm attorney with Ms. Bigelow. And I'm here with respect to Mr. Hudnut's case. And if there's any questions regarding that particular matter, I can speak to it if there's any questions. But otherwise, that was my reason for appearing today.
Okay, so we certainly will not have any questions for you. Is that all you wanted to share with us then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, I believe that, Jessica, is there anyone else from that law firm?
No, that would be Director Ross.
So that ends this call to the public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I have been asked, since we had a number of folks presenting to us on item 9N, that's Kelvin Ellaby, asked to move that first. So with if there are no objections from my colleagues, I will move us to 9N, and then we'll go back to the top. So this 9N is presentation and discussion on possible action for the request for review and rehearing for Kelvin Ellaby Jr., case number C 2022-000773 and C 2022-002754R. Do I have a motion to deny educator Kelvin Ellaby Jr.'s request for review and/or rehearing? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Hagerman, do I have a second? Superintendent Horn, any discussion or conversation? Online, none. All in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I'll move us on, or back, I guess, to item 9B, possible action and findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Nicole Asplin, case number C 2021-011690 for a period of 5 years. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all teaching certificates of Nicole Asplin, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion? Vice President Haley, do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Dr. Hagerman, any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
My apologies for interrupting, Dr. Core. We did not review 9A yet. We had to review 9A as well.
Oh, yes. That, which would normally come before 9B. You're exactly right. So thank you. I will circle us back to 9A, which is presentation and discussion and possible action to approve negotiated settlement agreements. We've got 5 of them. Michael Hudnut, case number C 2023-000602. Wesley Wagner, case number C 2022-002047. And Emily Elaine Berry, aka Emily Barnes, case number C 2023-000444 and C 2021-011688. And Ruben Macias, case number C 2022-000716. And the fifth and final one for Aaron Ullman, case number C 2022-000457. Do I have, I would like to take these in a single motion, obviously. Do I have a motion to approve items 9A1 through 9A5?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Catanese. Was that a second, Member Clay? Okay, Dr.
Yes.
Clay as a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay, then I will get us back on track, I hope, for 9C, which is the presentation, discussion, and possible action of findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the right to work in Arizona District or Charter School of Kayla Dye, case number C 2022-003383. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke the right to work in an Arizona District or Charter School of Kayla Dye, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Do I have a second? I think just by a split second, Superintendent Horn. Any discussion or conversation? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 9D, presentation and discussion and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of John Frocht, case number C 2022-003215. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of PPAC to revoke any and all certificates held by John Frocht, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Do I have a second? Vice President Haley, thank you. Any conversation or comments? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 9E, presentation and discussion and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendations of the Professional Practice Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Lewis Lummer, case number C 2021-012349. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all certificates held by Lewis Lummer, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion? So moved. Thank you, Member Catanese. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes as presented. 9F, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to the revocation of certificates of Thomas Parsons, case number C 2021-012711. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact and conclusion of law and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all certificates held by Thomas Parsons, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Catanese. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes. 9G, presentation and discussion and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Sherry Baker, case number C 2021-012623. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all certificates held by Sherry Baker, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion? Vice President Haley, do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Hagerman, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 9H, presentation and discussion and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of Professional Practices Advisory Committee to suspend the certificate of Connor Lortez, case number C 2022-000642 for a period of 3 years with conditions. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all script got up there to suspend the certificates of Connor Lortez for a period of 3 years with conditions? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Catanese. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Hagerman, thank you. Any conversation? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And 9I, presentation and discussion and possible action of the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Nancy Winters, case number C 2020-000139. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all certificates held by Nancy Winters, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Second by Vice President Haley. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 9J, presentation and discussion and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Matthew Ferguson, case number C 2021-012330. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all certificates held by Matthew Ferguson, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion? Thank you, Member Catanese. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 9K, presentation and discussion and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificate of Ernan Nicholas, case number C 2022-000828. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all certificates held by Vernon Nicholas, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Hagerman, do I have a second?
Second.
Member Catanese, thank you very much. Any discussion? I'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 9L, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Shafaleh Syed, case number C 2022-000437. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all certificates held by Shafaleh Syed, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 9M, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to deny the application for certificates and suspend certificates of Roberta Wagner, case number C 2021-012884 for a period of 3 years. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to deny the application for certification and suspend any and all certificates held by Roberta Wagner for a period of 3 years, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion? Thank you, Member Catanese. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. All right, we have moved to the end of the agenda, and Director Ross, you have maybe a couple of reminders about tomorrow and the rest of our time here in Yuma.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Just a reminder that tomorrow's retreat starts at 9. We started today at 10 in case folks were driving up, so tomorrow at 9, same room. There will be breakfast in that same room tomorrow as well. Thank you again to Arizona Western College for that. As far as today goes, there's lunch provided by AWC in that same room, and then there's a tour of AWC. We sort of left dinner on your own in case folks wanted to make plans, but we did give you 4 recommendations. If they're not great, blame Ashley Harrington from AWC. She's the one who gave them to us. Again, tomorrow at 9. And the one thing we ask for tomorrow is we are going to be reviewing strategic priorities, legislative priorities, research agenda. And if you could review those documents in this packet, that would be great. Thank you all so much. Thanks again to AWC for hosting, and see everybody tomorrow.
Cool.
See everyone tomorrow. Have a great evening.
Can you leave the binders? You absolutely can. Yeah, we'll secure the room, and you can take them with you. You can leave them here. All of that's fine. So I will then. There's a little tradition we have here at the college. I never leave a meeting here in Yuma without sharing that it's a great day to be a Matador. So I will invoke my home court privilege here and share that it's a great day to be a Matador, and adjourn this meeting at 1:46, and right behind us lunch is being served. There we go. It's a great day to be a Matador.